Yes, sir, the usual shilling, like, comment, subscribe, rate, share, put 5 stars on it, whatever you want. I've thought things a little bit better, and I'm a little bit worried for Warhammer the Old World. Mostly because a lack of starter set or starter box. It's okay. We have this in the Horus Heresy. There was no starter box per se as we have it with 40k or Age of Sigmar. It was just one huge box with a bunch of minis you could make into one army or two and play with them. My problem is that if they follow this model with Warhammer the Old World, which remember they said that there will be no starter boxes like 40k, but more things like the Horus Heresy with no cardboard, terrain, rule set, whatever. Because as they've mentioned, this isn't going to be your first foray into wargaming, which means they're gonna keep this as more of a specialized game in the same vein as the Horus Heresy, where you don't really need that much because it's not your first time doing this. My problem is that this is a huge mistake. You see, starter sets like they used to do for Warhammer Fantasy were a good way, and usually are a good way to get into a game, to get a decently sized army to start things off with, and to play with a friend. They work in a good way to start an army and get you into the hobby itself of wargaming. Deciding not to do that might be interesting because, of course, it worked with the Horus Heresy with the Age of Darkness box. But I think it's a huge mistake to do this with Warhammer the Old World. Let's look at the biggest aspect out there. Warhammer has a bunch of video games made off of its IPs. Some of them good, some of them bad, a bunch of horrible ones. But still, what are the most popular franchises out there when it comes to the Warhammer IP? Well, there was Dawn of War for 40k until they messed it up with Dawn of War 3. Space Marine is coming back. Darktide is a thing of sorts. I would really recommend, if you were into Darktide and want to buy it and stuff, to watch my buddy Natanix's 2000s video on Darktide. Will be linked below. What else is there? Well, there is the Total War Warhammer series, which is impressive, and it's probably at this point one of the biggest franchises for Total War. It is what Troy tried to be at some point, but failed because, they tried to play this historical and fantasy aspects of the game and kind of failed at both of them. Nevertheless, Total War Warhammer is huge. It's in its third incarnation, yes. And remember, there's also Vermintide, another huge popular game in the same way as Darktide, but this one is complete, and this one is the better game compared to Darktide. Nevertheless, what do we see in this? These are the most popular games. What do we see out of this? There's no Age of Sigmar in it. There's no Lord of the Rings, but then again, Lord of the Rings is a weird IP at this point. The most popular Warhammer games are Fantasy and 40k. You don't see Age of Sigmar, though Age of Sigmar tried to have a few games, and I think the best way for Age of Sigmar to blow up in the video game space is to just make a war cry game, not a war crime. Nevertheless, going back to the topic at hand. Capitalizing on the popularity of Warhammer Fantasy, Total War, Vermintide is a good idea, and that's why starter boxes would be better for the old world, and it would help it grow. That, and of course what I mentioned in my video on what Warhammer the Old World needs to succeed, and yes, lower prices because it's gonna be expensive. We all know it's going to be expensive. It comes from Games Workshop after all. But still, working with a starter box for this would help a lot. Confirming one would be beneficial because look at this. We know about the old world for some time, and a lot of time in fact. The problem is that by now they have been feeding us little droplets here and there, pieces together, and I don't think this is enough to continue the hype for it. We need more than that. We need more information. We need to be shown clearer things. What we had at Warhammer Fest with the Q&A and those two models, I guess, is good. It's decent. But it's like the most news and the biggest news we've had for the old world in quite a while. I am even willing to say that the news we found out at Warhammer Fest is honestly the second biggest news for the game since the announcement for the fantasy coming back. And it's been a while since that. It's been a while. The lack of a starter box isn't going to help this either, especially considering the whole time we're wasting not having more information. And really, what are we hyped up for? Bretonia and Tomb Kings from the beginning. Okay, good. Bigger bases for some units. Good. And that's mostly it. Because even the news we got into Warhammer Fest has just been a little line, threads, that pointed to Tomb Kings and Bretonia. And that's about it. There really hasn't been anything. And if you think about it, well, the second biggest news since the announcement of Warhammer The Old World, which is this Warhammer Fest Q&A, isn't really that surprising for the most part. But still, starter boxes could help, and it could help bring new people in. It could help people build armies, because there are people out there that have sold their Warhammer Fantasy armies, which it's a shame, but some people did that. Nevertheless, it would help a lot to bring starter boxes into this. Sure, huge boxes like Age of Darkness or something like that for Warhammer Fantasy, Warhammer The Old World, would be phenomenal. But as phenomenal as it would be, you still need to get in people. That's the reason why we have starter boxes for Age of Sigmar and Warhammer 40k, because it helps bring new people in. And that's what Warhammer The Old World needs. It needs to bring people in. Without bringing new people in, well, we're gonna get Warhammer The Old World news as well as we get Horus Heresy news. Which, by the way, when are those Assault Marines coming? Oh, way too late. That's the answer. The Assault Marines for the Horus Heresy are coming way too late. And this is a fear that I have eating at the back of my mind, that the old world will suffer because it will be treated as the Horus Heresy. In the beginning, things will be nice, but then just not. It won't be a thing. It will take a long while to get new information, new stuff about things, and it's not going to be treated as a main player for Games Workshop, which kind of points to that. And I'm quite disappointed because Warhammer Fantasy is popular. It's probably the second most popular incarnation of Warhammer after Warhammer 40k. And that's because of the good games that are out there. Still, treating it like this almost feels wrong. It almost feels bad to be treated like an afterthought, the same way the Horus Heresy was made. It just doesn't work, and it will not help create a good medium for Warhammer The Old World. It won't create a sustainable environment. But I might be wrong. Maybe no starter box is a good idea and things will look good in the end. But that's, of course, if we stop discussing how Games Workshop doesn't know what a pre-order is. Well, that's a story for a different time. I just think it's a mistake not to have starter boxes for this. It's lost miniatures for us as buyers, and it's lost revenue for Games Workshop. And we know Games Workshop cares a lot about its revenue. Anyway, this has been all. I hope you like this, and I'll see you in the next one.